Hi everyone, I hope you're safe and well. My name is Danesh-Mand, and it's my pleasure delivering this short presentation to you today. As you're probably aware, to further support the students undertaking the subject of Advanced Project Risk Management 15317, a number of additional online training material has been developed. These short targeted presentations will help you, hopefully, to better identify and understand the key aspects of this topic for your further studies. However, please note that this material should be only used as a supplementary material, not a replacement for full training documents and references provided for this subject. Please refer to the university's course online platform or contact your lecturer to access and discuss full set of training material for this subject. On that brief, let's start on our session today, which is for risk and contingency management. But before that, I would like to take you through some of the series of the sessions that are available. If you haven't used them or referred to them, there are a couple of case studies that are available. The session today is for risk and contingency management. At the same time, you also can refer to schedule contingency determination, cost determination, contingency determination, allocation, or control. So they're all available and you can use them in addition to your full documents. A quick introduction about myself. I'm currently a director with KPMG Australia, looking after project risk and risk management services for our clients. I'm still an engineer from background, but mainly work with the tier one contractors over a number of years before I became a consultant. I'm also president of New South Wales for Risk Engineering Society, or RES. RES. We are one of the technical associations under Engineers Australia, and we are trying to promote the application of risk engineering in developing and delivering major infrastructure projects. So on that basis, if there is, we do have also a group on LinkedIn, and I'm also there on LinkedIn. So if you would like to be connected and share some views and ideas, more than welcome. Please send me an invitation, and we will be connected there. In terms of the presentation today, I would like to highlight that the views expressed today are my own personal experiences or views and do not reflect or represent the official policy position or recommendation of the KPMG Australia, Engineers Australia, or Risk Engineering Society. And obviously, they just do have a general nature in terms of the content and should not be used for any decision making without further assessment for a specific requirements, right? Okay, I think with all the initial steps done, now let's get into the topic for today, and that's on the risk management and QRA. And if you haven't done your risk management, I think I strongly recommend that probably it would be better if you do the risk management initially before you do the contingency. But if I want to share at a very high level, how does risk and contingency they work together, or what's the relationship between them? This is a slide. So when you look at the ISO 31000, which is the latest revision of risk management standard in Australia, the document is putting the risk overall into three circles. One, starting from here, which is a framework. You need to have some framework in terms of designing, implementing, evaluation, improvement, and integration. All the circle around the leadership and commitment. There are a number of principles that to make sure that we create value and we protect value from risk management. And then last but not the least, and as you can see, there is a relationship between all those circles. The one that we are quite keen is the process for risk management. And the project risk management process, it's starting from establishing the context to risk assessment, which is covering the identification, risk analysis, and evaluation, risk treatment, and also we do have the communication and consultation and monitoring and review at the same time, and recording and reporting, which is obviously important concurrently. So the way it works, I mean, in terms of the contingency, is that you go through this process, you identify the risk, you do the analysis, you decided which risk you want to treat them, and then you start to treat them, right? From a treatment perspective, you can actually transfer them, you can mitigate them, you can do a number of other options that is available. If post-treatment, if the residual risk is still not acceptable and further treatment is not visible anymore, in other words, it doesn't make sense to spend a bit more money to reduce or mitigate the risk further or transfer the risk, or and at the same time you cannot accept still you cannot accept the risk, then you need a contingency for additional time and or cost. And that's the concept that is we are talking about today. So how the risk management works, and then how does the contingency will come into the picture. So this I thought this might explain the relationship between them. So in terms of, so now let's have a look in the contingency management, what actually it is. And as I said earlier, please note that this is a very short presentation, just giving you some topics and areas of concern and the key elements of the topic. Please refer to the full training material and other references to make sure that you get a good understanding, a very good understanding of the concept and its application, including some practical examples and case studies, right? So what the contingency is. So in terms of contingency, as we just discussed, if the residual risk after everything that you could do to treat the risk still is not acceptable, then you might consider some sort of allocation of resources, which might be cost resources, or it might be time, to add it into the base. And the base might be the base estimate, or it might be base schedule, to cover everything that you identify as a risk or uncertainty to the level that meets your requirement. And we will discuss very briefly very soon in terms of what the confidence level is, but it's important to note that the contingency shouldn't be a replacement for proper cost estimation. And what I mean by that is that sometimes people have said, oh, don't worry about the proper estimate, we just do the cost estimate and then we double it, or we put 50% on it as a contingency. That's not the purpose of contingency. Still, you need to do whatever you can to just make sure that you develop a proper cost estimate and a proper schedule, and then you start to have a conversation about the contingency. It's important to understand that and appreciate that. A couple of items, like if there is an event that is highly likely to occur, the recommendation is that you better put it into the base estimate, not in the contingency. I mean, we do see a lot of, I do a lot of reviews, and sometimes I do see that there is a risk with 80% likelihood as part of the contingency modeling. The recommendation is that by the time, because a lot of those likelihood and percentages, they are subjective, as soon as you get that sort of highly likely events, you better take them out from contingency and put them into the base estimate. And the other one is that just make sure that contingency shouldn't include or doesn't include escalation. Okay, so on that brief introduction, this is a document that I recommend you can actually start on. The subject of the contingency is quite a good document. Risk Engineering Society started this journey in 2013. And the purpose was, or the objective was, to put a reference for different practical risk-based decision-making approaches for both schedule and cost, making sure that it does cover it through the life cycle for the both project, program, and portfolio investment. The first edition of the document was released in 2016, and the second one was released last year, which is the second edition. A free copy of this, a complimentary copy of this document is available. Please, and I strongly recommend that you read it as a first document on the subject, and then can give you other references, both from a government perspective in Australia and also the internationally, globally. There are some other references that you can read. But the contingency guideline, the RES guideline, it is quite a good first step to help you going through that. A lot of discussions that we will have today, I think most of it, we are referring to this document. So when it comes to the outline for today's discussion, very briefly, is going through the process, understanding what are the key elements of the process, having a quick discussion about the contingency in terms of the development phase versus delivery phase. What's the differences? How does it work during the life cycle? We will have a quick discussion about the contingency at the project, program, portfolio level. Then we will discuss the project performance and also quickly referring to some government requirements in Australia. As you can appreciate, this is not, the topic is quite a heavy topic, and this 10 minutes or 15 minutes conversation cannot deliver the messages. This is just to highlight the areas, the key titles for the topics within this subject. So please refer to the full training material for further information. When it comes to the process, and that's quite important because a lot of people, when they're talking about the contingency, they usually think about the determination or calculation. However, the contingency management process is more than just how much, or in other words, in terms of the process that you see on the screen, it's only determination. But contingency, it does have other steps, like other stages, like when you calculate, which is the first one. The second one is that the allocation, and the allocation is, we will discuss it shortly, is that where do you put it, who owns that, how much, how, and so on. And then the control is that now we calculated the contingency, we allocated the contingency, but the question is now who's going to control it, and how do we want to control it, and then at the same time, how do we want to monitor it and report it. So this is the full cycle of contingency management. When it comes to determination or calculation, the guideline provides a wide range of tools and techniques. As you can see from the top, we do have some simple, at a very high level, the contingency determination usually sits under two groups, like deterministic and probabilistic. And then from a basic predefined factor base, which is based on the percentage, to first principles risk analysis, or FPRA at the bottom of the graph. It's a wide range of techniques. And obviously the time and cost of the determination increases as you move towards a complex requirement. There are some, if you're working in Australia, but there are some specific requirements when you're dealing with the projects that they get funding from the government. And sometimes you have to, the probabilistic cost estimation has to be used for some sort of certain project sizes in terms of the value. The second step is allocation. And allocation is for both time and cost. There is a session that specifically we will discuss about the allocation in more details, but at a very high level, this is the allocation. And if you put the cost estimate, we do have a base estimate. Then we have a consideration of P50 contingency, P50 escalation, P90 contingency, and P90 escalation, which gets you to the total announced budget. At the same time, we do have the base schedule and P50 contingency and P90 contingency from a schedule. And then the allocation, eventually, that's how we allocate the dollars, and it will give us the SCARE for performance measurement baseline, or PMB. And the PMB is the graph, or is the curve that we measure the performance against. So that's the allocation of contingency. Then at the last stage is that we get the project up and running. Now there is a change is identified, and you need to spend money from your contingency. Obviously, it's the other day I was having a conversation with a few people, and sometimes when there is a change and you need to spend money, you don't you don't need to, or you don't want to have access to the contingency. You can save from some other cost account, so you can actually transfer money from one bucket to the other one. So in one of them, it's underspending, the other one overspending, so you can transfer them. You can bring money from outside. In other words, like for example, you can ask for a variation, or you can internally get some additional money for it. One of the options is that if there is no other option, if you cannot bring from some other underspend, if you cannot get a variation, one of the options is that use your own contingency, and that's the process that we are talking about. So when you started to access your bucket of money, then you need to identify. There is obviously a change, then you need to look at it. And so is that the scope change, is that the unforeseen, is that the inherent or contingent risk that we identified previously and now happened. Then you go through the change control process, and so on and so on. So you continue a process up to the stage that you get the approval, and then you can spend money. What's the difference between the development and delivery? And that's quite a fundamental issue, is that at the stage of development, let's pick a contractor scenario. A contractor firm or a contractor who's putting a submission to win a lump sum contract, DNC contract. The more contingency they put into the submission, the confidence level of winning the job goes down, and that's the blue line. So the more money you put here, the likelihood or confidence level of winning successfully goes down, obviously, because it's a competitive environment. If you ask for more money, the likelihood that you get it is going down. However, if you win the job, the likelihood that you deliver it successfully goes up because you have more money. If something goes wrong, if you're late, if you hit a cable, you have money to spend it. And the challenge is to identify this point, and this point is the optimum contingency. And please note that this is not linear. A lot of situations that we do have in companies is that those lines, two lines, they are not linear, but for the purpose of presentation, we just put them linear. But the challenge for a lot of organizations is that to identify this optimum, and we call it the contingency X factor. And the contingency X factor is that trying to help and understand the organization's practice in terms of the cost estimation, risk appetite, everything altogether, how much contingency is enough to win and deliver the job successfully. When you set it up, then the second part of it, which is the delivery phase, is that how to monitor the contingency. And that's a concept that came, probably it's quite a new concept, and it's a bit different with the traditional traffic light that the project controls, they usually use it. Without going into too much detail, the concept, the way it works is that on a regular basis, in addition to the traditional cost control, schedule control, remaining duration and everything, you assess the confidence level of achieving the project or finishing the project on time and within the budget. And if generally when you start the project, usually within that sort of range of confidence level, it might be 60%. It's not 100% because it's not, you don't win the job, but generally it might be 60, it might be 50 sometimes, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, within that sort of range, you start the project. A lot of major projects that we do see is that over the time, they start to have challenges, variations, and so on, and the projects start to have dropped the confidence level. The traditional project controls generally doesn't pick the problem until it's too late, until it gets to some sort of very low confidence levels that it might be a bit late to address them. And as a result, I'm sure you have seen or heard that a lot of projects, they go green, 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 amber, red. And the difference between the amber and red is only a month or 2 months maximum. from a risk perspective, it doesn't happen. You actually, what it happened is that you started to get into the amber zone few months ago, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, and then gradually you went back, down, down, until you get here. And that's the time that the traditional progress report, it gives you the amber this month, and then the next month is red because you're actually on the border. So the risk-based project control, which is the new concept, is trying to highlight when you start the amber, not the end of the amber, which is the traditional project controls. And that distance, based on my experience, is that it can be as good as 6 to 9 months for some of our major projects. And that's quite valuable, very valuable, as a matter of fact, because you can actually, if you know the problem 6 months earlier, there are more options that you might have rather than just leave it to the last minute to solve the problem. The other element, and by the way, the guideline, as I said earlier, does have a section or a chapter for each of those slides. So everything that we are going through it today with one slide, it does have its own chapter, and sometimes even the section or chapter on its own. So you can imagine that there's quite a lot of details we'll get into it, but today I would like to share with you some of the headlines with this subject to give you a better understanding of it. The project lifecycle is another concept that it's important to understand. As you can see, there are a number of gates that we do have, and the projects usually, especially from the government perspective, they're going through some sort of a strategic assessment or prelim business case, final business case, tender award, and then the completion. From a contractor's perspective, usually they stay within this part. In other words, from a contractor's perspective, they usually work on this from tender award to construction, design and construction and completion. But from the government, the journey has started sometimes years back. Maybe it might be 3, 4, 5 years before the tender award, the journey has started. And that's how we are measuring the contingency. The other part of the other headline for contingency is that how do you manage the contingency at different levels of project portfolio? And if you haven't heard the term project, programs, and portfolio, what it is that the project obviously is a project. Program is a combination of multiple projects together, and portfolio is covering multiple programs together. So the key message here, and the number of tools that the guideline is providing to the industry, is that if you have one project, you cannot, the way that you calculate and the way you manage the contingency is quite different, or it should be different with the scenario that you have 10 projects. And some of the graphs, that the one that you see here on the screen is one of the examples. And the way it works is that, for example, if you have 10 projects and you want to be 90% confident or have a P90 across the 10 programs, you don't need to have P90 for each project and then add them together, because it's not the optimal way. You come to this graph and it said that's 10, you go up, you see the 70%. If you want to be confident for the program level, 90% is here, comes to here. You actually, with the 10 projects, if you plan for, I don't know, 68% confidence level at the project level, by the time, if you have 10 programs and they're all having some assumptions that you see some key assumptions there, then the confidence level at the program level is about P90. That's how it works. But there are a number of other tools available as well. But it's important to appreciate that the contingency calculation or determination at the project, program, and portfolio does make a difference. When it comes to the project performance, then there's another headline that during the delivery phase, this is how you need to manage the contingency and how you develop it. And probably you remember that I said the performance measurement baseline That's how you establish that. And the project-based performance measurement baseline, you see under PMB, we do have the base estimate or base schedule, which does have the direct cost, indirect cost, and principals cost, and you allocate the contingency, P50, and escalation together, and that's how you develop the performance measurement baseline. If you're using some of the performance tools or techniques like end value calculation, the the interdependencies and some sort of relationship and how does the end value and contingency works together is quite critical, and without it, it will make a lot of challenges. Some of the references to the government requirements, especially if you're dealing, as I said earlier, with the major projects in Australia. I'm not going through them. The list is quite, it's a big list. One of the documents or sources of information that I strongly recommend that in addition to the RES guideline, if you're interested to better understand the federal government's requirements, this is the set of documents that are available from the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communications in Canberra. Last but not the least, again, I'm not going through them one by one, but just a few takeaways. Like, as I said, contingency is more than just calculation. Make sure that this is supporting the decision making, not just as a number. And that decision is an informed decision. There is no right or wrong decision. I remember some projects that a lot of people say, oh, we need to refer to the P50, P80, P90. That's not the case. I mean, I work myself with the tier one contractors. We did have some projects that we decided to go for a proposal with the lower level of confidence level for a number of reasons. So it's not about the trying to push the price up. It's all about the informed decision. Making sure that you have the execution plan in place, make sure that the change control, especially from a contractors and government, even government perspective, the change control is quite important to have a proper process in place. Consistency between the work breakdown structure and the cost breakdown structure is fundamental. Doing some independent schedule health check is absolutely important. The process of contingency is a cycle. Appreciate that. And then the QRA or some sort of quantitative risk analysis for a lot of major projects, we do recommend that you assess confidence level on a quarterly basis at the minimum. And then making sure that you measure how much do you need versus how much do you have. And in some scenarios, if the difference between how much do you need versus how much do you have in your pocket is more than 20%, for example, it's an alarm. In other words, it will say, oh, hang on a sec, maybe you're getting into the amber zone at the earliest stage. And I usually say that the early warning or early bad news is actually the good news. And that's the whole purpose of the contingency, especially at the control. So you try to measure and determine or calculate the reasonable contingency. But the more important part is that the allocation and control, because you just want to make sure that you identify the problem as early as possible. Because if the money is not enough, you don't want to wait till it's too late. And I think that's for today's discussion. As I highlighted earlier, please keep in touch with your lecturer or myself. Through the email or phone is probably email is the best one. I'm also on LinkedIn, and please be connected. If you would like to join RES LinkedIn group, you're more than welcome, and also myself. But if there's anything that I might be able to help, please let me know. On that, till the next time, thanks. Enjoy your studies and good luck. Bye.